Thank you. Hello. Hello, Nicole. Your attention, please. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Clark, and this is the ITV Technology Forum. This is an opportunity for all of us to kind of get together and learn something new about a technical topic. We invite speakers, internal and external, to kind of come and present to us. And today we're very kind of honoured to have Rory Smith, who's the kind of the product manager for the paid portion of Gov.uk, and he's going to be talking about the kind of the history of the GDS. And yeah, thank you very much, Rory, for coming in. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So I tried to do a little bit of homework about ITV, and you might see that a theme of what I'm talking about is that GDS is a platforms organisation, and I think we've approached the sort of platforming perhaps from slightly different ends of the spectrum, and we might be meeting in the middle. So watch out for that as I go. So the first thing is hello. I'm from the Government Digital Service, and we look like this, or at least we did look like this about 4 years ago. So this was the first birthday of Gov.uk, and you might recognise a consistent theme because this is how we looked last week for the 5th birthday of Gov.uk. And this is my team, and you might still see the theme, which is, yes, that is a cake shaped like a till. So what we're not about is cake. What we are about is digital, and digital is not just about computers or cake, it's about people. So one of my former colleagues at the Government Digital Service, Tom Loosemore, talks about digital as being the changing of expectations. So it's about applying the culture, practices, processes and technologies of the internet to respond to people's raised expectations. And that's basically what we're trying to do at GDS. We are playing catch-up to a certain extent. Government hasn't traditionally been the most obviously dynamic or digitally enabled organisation, but we're in a world where people in all sorts of parts of their lives interact with really great digital services. And actually, government is a huge service provider. In fact, it's what we exist to do. And we should be meeting the raised expectations that people have across their life in their interactions with government. And what that means for us is things like Gov.uk, so building a single web domain for government, which I'll talk a bit more about later, or the project that I've been working on for the last 2 years, Gov.uk Pay, which is making it easier for citizens to pay online for public services, and crucially more efficient, so that we're saving more of your hard-earned taxpayer money. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the GDS story. I'm going to give you some of the history, for which some of bits of it I was involved in. And I'm also going to talk to you about our design principles, because they're one of the things that I care most about at GDS, and they're something that kind of informs everything that we do. They started life as the GDS design principles, but they've recently been rebranded and taken over as government's design principles. So there are a list of 10 there, and I'm going to pepper my talk with reference to a few of those. And the last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about what I've learned so far. So I'm not professing to have all the answers, and definitely GDS doesn't think that it has the answers, but there are things that we've learned over the course of the last 5 years, or now nearly 6 years, that might be interesting for you to talk about. And what I hopefully will do is leave time at the end for questions, because it's much more interesting to have a conversation than it is just to listen to me blather on. So the GDS story, as far as I'm concerned, is really summarised sort of in 2 slides, which is we're working on a user-centred government, and we want to do it one small piece at a time. So what this kind of speaks to is the major difference between public services maybe and the private sector is that people don't choose to interact with government. No one can choose to be our customer, and that's why we talk about users, not customers, because you have to pay your taxes. You have to get visas when you want to visit the UK. It's not a choice. And so that's why I guess the most important of all of our design principles is start with user needs. It's design principle number 1. And throughout everything that we've done, we've always tried to put the needs of users at the heart of what we're designing. So if I start with a history lesson, I'm going to begin with fixing publishing. So way back when, the UK government's online presence looked something like this. If you remember anything about DirectGov, it's probably just that it was very orange. And if you're really sneaky, you can still find little portions of the web estate online that have some of the remnants of DirectGov's branding. Now, back in 2010, this was the main government website. We had something also called BusinessLink. This was the consumer-facing portal, if you like, the end-user-facing portal, and BusinessLink was aimed at businesses. And it was run in a pretty old-fashioned manner. So there were major updates or releases only every 6 months. and content was controlled very strongly in these departmental silos. And in fact, DirectGov itself was a project that was run by one individual department, Department for Work and Pensions. And what that meant was that actually making any changes was really time-consuming, and the site wasn't really designed to meet user needs. In fact, finding out what you needed was really hard, and there was lots of stuff on there that hardly anyone looked at. So we had stuff about, you know, how a wave is formed, or whether or not you should wear a jumper if it was chilly at home, or things that were just either frankly patronising or totally irrelevant to most people's daily lives. So along came this lady, Martha Lane Fox. So in 2010, when the coalition government came to power, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, Frances Maude, asked Martha to lead a review of DirectGov. So Martha, many of you may have heard of as entrepreneur. She founded lastminute.com, and at the time was the UK's digital champion. And so she was an influential voice, I guess. Now, Frances asked her to write a report on DirectGov, but what she really did was go away and write a review that was about revolution, not evolution. So I think that Frances probably expected her to go away and say, you know what, you can do a tweak here and there. And what she came back to say was, actually, I'm not just going to oversee the strategic review of DirectGov. I am not looking at it in isolation, but as part of how government can use the internet both to communicate with and interact better with citizens. So that was lucky for us, because what it meant was we had a blueprint for doing something much more ambitious than tweaking around the edges of a broken system. And if you sort of summarise Martha's report into 4 points, it's really this: set up a centre of digital excellence, fix publishing, fix transactions, and go wholesale. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of those ones. So before Martha's report, there had been a legacy of lots of people trying to do the right thing in government. I don't want you to go away from this talk thinking like, oh, before GDS existed, no one did anything that was worthwhile, and then GDS came along and fixed everything. It wasn't like that at all. There were loads of isolated pockets of people thinking about user-centered design, people thinking about delivering software in an agile way, but they were disparate and unsupported. And so the first thing that Martha said was, actually, you've got to go and establish somewhere that these people can find a home and really start to build a momentum around the kind of change that we want to see. So I think the great thing that Frances Maude did was that he saw Martha's report, and instead of umming and ahhing, he just said yes. And that gave us a mandate, and it's how we got started. And for those of you who haven't worked in government, having a mandate is really important. If you go to the right decision makers and they put their names on the bottom line for what you're doing, it means that you can knock away a lot of sort of process barriers that the system places in front of you. So really the fixed publishing bit all starts with gov.uk. So in 2012, when we launched, gov.uk became the single web domain for government. But to begin with, it looked something like this. So this is the very first doodle or sketch that I can find of what gov.uk was like. You'll see that it has some things that you might recognise if you've been to gov.uk recently, like our big sort of search box. You might not recognise this ukgov.gov.uk, we simplified that. And also we had this kind of wild idea about banner ads on gov.uk, which thankfully we didn't run with. But over time, that design was iterated, and I think that's where I'm going to come to one of our other design principles. So this was one of the very earliest HTML prototypes of gov.uk, still not looking all that familiar. And then we launched with an alpha after 3 months, and it looked like this. And basically, Tom Loosemore, the man that I referenced at the beginning who made that quote about digital, he asked the developers working on the AlphaGov to build something that would provoke the response in the ministers, which is, I want one of those. And that's what they tried to do. So he also told the team to give it a West Coast look, so hopefully we lived up to that. So this is roughly what gov.uk looked like when we went live. The team was going quickly. Preparing for live was really a massive task because we had to rewrite hundreds of pages of content and frankly get rid of loads of other content. So all of gov.uk is written for a reading age of around 11, so that ideally anyone that visits gov.uk can understand what they're reading. And every single page that we put on that first live instance was based on an individual user need. So we had this thing which you can, if you want to find out more about it, you should go and have a look at our blog called the Needatron. And it was this process that we went through to really try and categorize all the needs that were really important and prioritize them and see if that we could meet them. But like I said, one of the most important parts of it was actually getting rid of stuff. But all of that, I hope, demonstrates the fifth design principle, which is iterate and then iterate again. And so we've continued to iterate, and this is what gov.uk looks like today. Now, it's not finished, because it never will be. I'm sure that you probably feel the same about the work that you do. We're always iterating, we're always changing and improving. But what's important is that before gov.uk, no government website had been built in this way. They had all been outsourced, usually to major suppliers, and they were procured, commissioned, or just bought. And what that meant was someone went away with a series of requirements and came back 2 years later and said, ta-da, here it is. And actually, 2 years later, what they'd provided wasn't what we needed. And after that, they tend to die of neglect. So we didn't just have to build gov.uk. We had to transition an entire government onto one domain. So that was 312 organisations who all had their own websites. They look something like this. Onto the single domain, we had to transition lots of content, redirects, new content, the whole shebang. But what that was about is, I guess, another design principle, which is doing the hard work to make it simple. And if I had a favourite design principle, this is probably it. Because what we're trying to do is make people's lives easier. You know, government doesn't exist to be a barrier to you to get on and do stuff. People might think that that's what we're here for, but it's really not why we're there. What we're here for is to make your lives easier if we can. And that is the sort of underlying ethos for what we do with gov.uk. And I think that I really want to stress that we don't think we've got it right. You know, we started gov.uk with a really, I guess, defining mission was that we want to make things easier for the average Joe, you know, the citizens who just get on with their lives. And what that meant was we had to make some prioritization decisions. And we know, for example, that with gov.uk, we didn't tackle the needs of specialist users that well to begin with, you know, if you're a lawyer or a researcher or people like that. So there are now missions in our quarterly cadence cycle looking at exactly that. You know, how do we better support people who scrutinize government, people who want to access specific policy, all that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm going to come back to that at the very end with just one of my reflections. So this is kind of what gov.uk looks like now. Hopefully, well, maybe many of you have used it, and I'd love to hear at the end if you think that it's any good. So the other thing I should say is that although I'm telling you a story about GDS, what this really is a story about digital across government. So yes, maybe we formed a vanguard, but right now there are teams all over government in every large ministerial department, even small agencies who, you know, either they're well-resourced, they have multidisciplinary agile teams, they're doing really good work, or they're just, you know, isolated voices who want to take a user-centered approach. But all of those people and the communities, we do a lot of work with those communities, are what make the transformation across government possible. So I think it's probably fair to say that now gov.uk is part of our national infrastructure. It's as important as roads or the electricity grid or anything else, because it really is the front door for most people into government services. And we treat it in the same way that we would all of those things, with the same robustness, resilience, and kind of grown-upness. I think that's another part of the story of GDS, is that, you know, we're growing up. We've had to grow up. We've had to learn how to grow up. We started as a kind of skunk works, a few people smashing some things together and making shiny stuff that ministers got excited about, and now we run one of the most important pieces of national infrastructure. And, you know, we don't always get it right, but it's an exciting ride. So the second part of Martha's report was about fixing transactions, and while gov.uk was going on, we were getting on and doing some other stuff first. So we were building a product called gov.uk Verify. You'll notice a branding theme, which is basically a digital solution to proving that you are who you say you are when you transact online. It's novel. It does things in a way that other centralized government identity systems haven't before, mostly as a response to the very vocal and strong privacy lobby in the UK that we didn't, you know, there was a national decision that we didn't want identity cards or anything that resembled a centralized database. So we built a federated identity model. I'm happy to talk to you. It's very complicated. I'm happy to talk to you about it more afterwards. And at the same time as Verify, we also started to look at whether or not we could lead the charge of service transformation by taking 25 of the largest services by transactional volume of the top 50 and setting ourselves, just under 2 years to see if we could make them digital by default. And what we meant by digital by default was so good online that people would prefer to use them online than through any other channel that they had. So we think of the transformation as a huge success, but that's not because all 25 were live by the end of the 2 years. So you can see here we had 15 services live. We had 9 in beta, which means that we have actually released them to the public, but we still carry beta branding, which sort of makes clear to people that they're not, you know, there might be a bit buggy. You know, and one of them in alpha, which means that actually we didn't progress to the point where we were happy to open it up to real users. And I think, you know, for transformation, what we did was we employed lots of people centrally and then sent them out as a kind of support service to all of these different departments who owned these services to try and kickstart that new way of service delivery. And it inevitably meant that we had to make some compromises. We chose to focus on the user-facing side of our journey so that we really engaged citizens in the services they were accessing. And what that meant is that sometimes we couldn't fix the whole end-to-end journey. We couldn't, you know, tackle the legacy systems that underlied the service or anything else. But we had some big success stories. So, for example, one of the services that we think of as a huge success was the carer's allowance application. So carer's allowance is something that you claim as a benefit if you're caring full-time for someone else who's disabled. And we basically use digital as the way of saying, actually, can we ask whether this service is designed in the right way? We said, OK, there are 250 questions here. How many of these 250 questions do you actually need to know as a service? What's the minimum viable information you need from your users to deliver them the service that they want? So in the process, we stripped out about half the questions. We cut out, we cut by 40% the ineligible claims because we provided better guidance. It was more intelligible for people to understand what they were doing, which saves, hundreds of thousands a year. There are now 5 times fewer ineligible claims made via the digital service than there were on the paper alternative. And we save £1 million a year just by not printing the paper and distributing it, because every single form that we print costs us about £4. So that was one success story. Another was that HMRC, we worked with them on the digital tax account. So if you've used it or haven't, I don't know if any of you do self-assessment, but I'd encourage you to go and log in and try it out. I happened to be in an event totally randomly about nothing to do with work last night, and the head of policy, Theresa May's head of policy from Number 10 was there, and I randomly spoke to him, and he, apropos nothing, said, "Oh, I really love the tax stuff. I've worked out that I was, overcharged £3,000 last year." But I would encourage you to try it out. What it means is that actually we're now down to 1 call per 8,000 payments of self-assessment. So one of the things that we look for in efficiency savings in government is what we call failure demand, or reasons that people draw on government resources when they really don't need to. It's a product of failure rather than because they actually need to talk to us. So we've cut down. I think we were at 18 calls per 8,000 payments, and so it's sort of 18 times fewer calls with the digital service. And all of these initiatives in just 2015 and 16 alone save government loads of money, and lots more money over the course of the last 3 years. But I guess for many at GDS, probably more than the money that we save, it's the users that we help that motivate us. And rather than hear me try and explain that to you, I thought it would be nice if you got to meet one of them. So Anne is probably our most famous user, because I still can't watch this video without slightly getting a tear in my eye, but I'm not going to pressure you in that to follow my example. Oh, no, Jesus.
I'm 67, and I've done the lasting power of attorney for my mother. My mum's grasp on modern day living, as it was a bit limited, so it was decided then that I would pay all the bills, sort everything out for her. 3 years ago I had a stroke, and you start thinking about your own mortality, and you start thinking about, well, if something had have happened to me, then how would Mum have coped? What would have happened? Anyway, looking on the internet, and I literally stumbled across the government site for the lasting power of attorney. started to look at it and I thought, this is good, because you can download all the paperwork yourself, you don't need a solicitor. And the instructions that went with each section of the lasting power of attorney they were in proper people speak, not in legal jargon, so it was very easy for me to follow it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, you know. It's easy. The written instructions, you just can't go wrong. And I would say now to anybody, don't be frightened, don't worry about going to see a solicitor, do it yourself. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I did it when I did it, and my mum's really pleased. And can I say thank you? I just want to say thank you to everybody involved in doing the website, because it's given me peace of mind, and I'm sure it gives a lot of people peace of mind. And my friend now is doing that, and you've made it so simple and so easy for anybody to do. And I just hope that anybody who sees this film, please do it, and you'll feel so relieved afterwards. You know, it's great to know that the people that you care for, everything's looked after for them. Thank you.
So that's Anne. I hope it wasn't as much of a tearjerker for you as it is for me. I would encourage all of you, actually, if you haven't looked at the lasting power of attorney process, to have a look at it online. It means that your loved ones, often older relatives or people who may be mentally incapacitated in the near future, give you the right to administer their affairs should they need it. And it's, as Anne said, an easy online process that people used to spend thousands on by employing solicitors, and now you can do for yourself. So those are the kind of services that we worked on in the transformation program. But one of the things that we learned was that using a central organisation like GDS to support departments fixing services one by one, it wasn't a scalable way of doing transformation, because there are thousands of government services and we're a small team. You know, there are 450,000 civil servants, and there are, right now, GDS is the largest it's ever been, and there are only 800 of us. So, you know, if we have any hope of trying to drive the transformation across government, we can't do it one service at a time. And what we also realised was that many services that we were working with of the 25 were made up of these similar building blocks, and we were often reinventing the wheel over and over again. You know, each service had to develop an appointment booking tool, or to work out how to take payments, or to work out how to host itself. Just in the same way that you tackled your common platform approach, you know, to say, like, why are we all doing this separately? Why don't we do it once and do it well? And that, I guess, that realization is what led to the program that I work on, which is Government as a Platform, and which is basically a set of shared components, service designs, platforms, data hosting that every government service can use to build great digital services. So I'll give you one example, because it's the thing that I've been working on. In the past, if you were lucky, you could pay online for public services. Many public services still take cash, checks, postal orders. But even if you were lucky and you had an online public service offering that took payment online, each of those different services would have gone out to do a direct technical integration with a payment service provider. They would have contracted separately with a payment service provider, which meant that actually, you know, horrifyingly, different government departments paid different prices for the same product to the same supplier. And it meant that actually you became locked in, because once you'd spent all the money integrating with one supplier, even if you could get a better rate from someone else next year, you wouldn't swap because the upfront cost of switching was so high. So with GovUK Pay, what we're doing is building, if you like, in a sense, a payment marketplace, I suppose, but certainly a broker between government services and the various underlying payment service providers, so that we do the hard work once. We integrate with each of the different payment service providers once, and any government service can integrate with us, and then in the future they're agnostic. If they want to switch, they can switch through a UI. They don't have to do any more technical work. They don't have to do any more contracting. And that, I guess, is just an example of the kind of thing that we want to do. some of this is technical. Yes, we're building a technical platform. But if you come back to what I said at the beginning, that digital is about people, a lot of this is about knowledge and expertise. Actually, every team that comes to learn about payments, the cost isn't only in them building an integration with a payment service provider, it's like working out what the hell a payment gateway is versus a merchant acquirer, and how you go around running an OJU versus a call-off contract on a framework. People don't know this stuff because it's not part of their day-to-day job. And so what we're doing is both delivering technical solutions, but also centralizing expertise in a way that means that we don't continually reinvent the wheel. And in so doing, we also make sure that we're delivering a better service for our users. So if you think about government as an e-commerce business, until very recently, most of the interactions you had online might have been perfectly designed in a kind of GovUK-styled interface until you got to the payment experience, when you would be sent off to a hosted payment page from a payment service provider that kind of looked like it was from the 90s, and probably sent you a receipt from, again, a brand that you don't recognize, and changed the URLs, everything. And actually, people felt really uncomfortable with that. Can you imagine going to the end of an Amazon journey, and at the end of your Amazon journey you get sent to some page you've never seen, and you're like, what the hell is going on? I'm being scammed. That's how people feel like when they interact with government. So not only are we driving efficiency so that we're spending your taxpayer money better, and mine, but also that we deliver better services because of it. So Pay is one of the new products that we're thinking about doing once and well. We also have something called GovUK Notify, so that's where we found out that lots of failure demand was being driven by people just being like, what the hell is going on with my interaction with government? I sent you this form 3 weeks ago, why haven't I heard anything? And what we realized is what people didn't want is a My Account feature where they had to go and log in and track the process of their order, because that's another thing they had to do. What they wanted to know is just what's going on. So again, what I should stress is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not becoming a payment gateway or a merchant acquirer. We're not becoming an SMS text message sending supplier or an email supplier. But what we are doing is going out and buying that stuff once, building tooling that means that other people can take advantage of it in a way that meets the user expectation of what GovUK should be like and delivers better value for government. And the third of our new platforms is called GovUK Platform as a Service, which I guess is most akin to the work that you've been doing on the common platform here at ITV, which is really acknowledging that working out how to host good digital services online is a really duplicative process that everyone's doing again and again, and actually coming up with ways to do your logging and monitoring and your deployments, everything. Why should that be bespoke? So the truth is, though, that we were kind of always in the platform game. So it feels like to us, our government as platform, that's our new strategy, it's what we're doing until 2020, this is the new vision for GDS. But actually, if you take a step back, we were definitely in the technology platform game before that. Gov.uk is a tech platform. We're saying, you know what, every government department has to publish information online and deliver services, so why don't we work out how to do that once and well and make it available to everyone? Verify, like I said, so many government services have to check that you are who you say you are when you interact with them. Why don't we do that well? But I think the thing that I realized actually really in the preparation for this talk was that we think of ourselves as a platform business on the tech side, but really being a platform sort of organization is about platform in the broadest sense. And a lot of the platforms that we provide to the rest of government aren't technical. They're about knowledge, they're about best practice setting, they're about sharing information. So we have something called the Service Toolkit. Now the beginning of the Service Toolkit is about standards. Because as we experimented, GDS, we learned and then we codified. And I think one of the really interesting themes for us is how do you scale an agile organization? How do you allow the autonomy of teams to go away and do work out things for themselves, but at the same time not become this chaotic mess where everyone's doing things differently? And the way that we've approached that is to be experimental and learn, but then codify, and then in a kind of, I guess in a way that science might do, which is sort of peer review, we prove an approach, and then we use it for a while, and if someone can demonstrate a proven approach that we update our guidance. So, for example, this is the service standard. There are now 18 points on the service standard. It's about rigorous peer review. Again, I guess a scientific analogy. Any service that takes more than 100,000 transactions a year comes for a central review. And that doesn't mean that it's just GDS sitting on panels. We're not there just to mark everyone's homework. We get people from departments to sit on panels that do those reviews, so that actually people from HMRC and the tax people might be looking at services delivered by the justice system to say, does it meet the standards that we think that we should be holding ourselves to? So what I want to make clear is that this itself is, in a sense, an iterative process, because we started off with, I think, 23 points, and then we moved down to 18, because actually, in the process of running that standards assurance process, we realised that we didn't need these extra, we were being duplicative. And I think that's something that, I don't know, as you continue to grow, it's something that's really interesting to reflect on, is how do you take this autonomous approach to doing service delivery, which works so well, because you allow people the freedom to come up with the right solution, but also give it a structure that means that you don't end up with chaos. So one of the other platforms, I guess, that we developed that I haven't really talked about so far, and maybe it's a bit more closer to what you've been doing, is our technology code of practice. So historically, government approaches to technology have been really pretty cyclical. We've gone from phases of massive outsourcing to insourcing to outsourcing. But we had, certainly in the sort of 2010, we'd come to a point where most of the government provision of technology was outsourced, and we'd made what we now consider to be a bit of a mistake in that we'd outsourced our systems integration as well as the provision of infrastructure and services. So in alongside all of the end-user-facing digital stuff that it's kind of whizzy, it's easy to talk about, behind the scenes we were doing a lot to set this code of practice. We were looking at how IT governance worked in government. So this is a totally unintelligible wire diagram that kind of explains the technology governance of one government department, and saying, actually, we're going to set a new standard, which is that technology governance is divided into 4 things, and each of these will have an expert board, and that's it. So we were about simplification, about setting a pattern that people could follow, both in the sort of end-user facing services, but also in the kind of nuts and bolts of how you actually got around to delivering them. And what that meant was we could start to, by setting standards that we leveled the playing field for suppliers. So historically, these are the postcodes of the people supplying government technology. What we used to talk a lot about is saying no to big IT. What that doesn't mean is that we don't want to play with large technology suppliers. What it means is they have to play by the same rules as an SME or anyone else that wants to deliver services to government. And so that map on the right is actually a bit out of date now, but that's the postcode map of the supplier base for government technology sort of more recently. And to do that, we also provide platforms. So we have something called the digital marketplace, where lots of different small providers can register, and it's easy for government teams to buy from them without, and hopefully streamlining the procurement process. And I think one of the things that's most interesting for us, and this is a bit about us growing up, I think that we did, as an organisation, focus so much on helping other departments that we didn't always think about how we were doing things. So actually, internally, we probably were a little bit chaotic at times. We allowed autonomy, total autonomy, in a sense that many of our teams use different tech stacks, and we didn't have a very, I guess, grown-up approach to how we were doing our things, because we were spending so much time trying to help departments do things better. And that's where what's called the GDS way, I know it kind of sounds like a cult, but I promise it isn't, is coming from now, which is actually trying to codify how do we take built on the kind of underlying principles of the code of practice, what are the specific sort of instances that we are going to use at GDS. And I think what all those things are about is really doing less and doing less better. So rather than reinventing the wheel over and over again, maybe we could just do that once and give us more space to focus on the fewer things and do them better. So one of the things that we think about is actually, it's totally right that the Department for Work and Pensions understands the lived experience of benefits claimants. We at the centre, it's not our job to do that. What it is our job to do is take away all of the boring other bits of delivering services to those people that aren't specific to benefits claimants, so that actually the DWP can focus on the bits that really matter to their individual users. And in so doing, our job is this. This is actually a ministerial catchphrase, so that's why it sounds a bit sort of big picture. Enabling departments to transform the relationship between the citizen and the state. And that's what we're trying to do with some of our most popular services. So register to vote. This was, I guess, a few years of big democratic participation, let's put it, in the UK, with elections and referendums. And register to vote was a way that we actually challenged an existing status quo. We originally were told that we couldn't move the registration process online because of the way that it was federated to local councils and required paper and signatures. But by sort of knocking at the door and getting the right mandate, we were able to do that. Or, for example, renewing your passport online. These are things that, you know, people do every day, and they're now much easier because of the work that we've done with departments and at the centre. And that, I guess, is about this principle, which is that we're really here to build digital services and not websites. But the problem is that building really good digital services, and by services we mean, you know, enabling users to do stuff, involves all of these different silos of people. And traditionally in government, particularly the policy space and the delivery space, have been very split. So, you know, what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So one of the intentions behind that policy and delivery split was that back in the 80s, it was felt that the kind of airy-fairy thinkers were interfering too much in the delivery of stuff and actually reducing efficiency, and we weren't delivering good services. So the decision was taken to hive off delivery. But what that meant was now you get the airy-fairy thinkers coming up with ideas and chucking them over the wall to people who have to deliver them, and there's total disconnect between what those things do. So we, I guess, are real advocates of multidisciplinary teams, not just in the digital sense that you have user researchers and designers and developers and product managers, but also that you have policy people and strategists and, you know, government analysts in there, all being part of a service design process. And the other thing in government that makes that so hard is that we are, you know, literally siloed, both in the buildings that we work in the funding streams that we have. You know, everything is done on the departmental model. And what that means is that actually, you know, if you're someone going through the justice system, you might well interact with Home Office, the MOJ, and maybe when you come out of prison, the DWP. But we don't think about the way that we fund those departments doesn't make it easy to do that end-to-end service design. So I guess the GDS vision for the future is that, you know, services will shape government, not the other way around. Right now, for too long, we've been, I guess our service delivery has been shaped by organisational structure, and we're starting to see the seeds of a shift in context. If you want to know a bit more about what we are working on sort of for the next few years, the Government Transformation Strategy was published earlier this year. You can Google it online, and it explains kind of the general strands. Most of them I've talked about. A lot of it is about, you know, building that common infrastructure of tooling and guidance, and also providing the, you know, I guess more tailored support to individual departments and groups of departments to think about how they do service delivery across the space. I thought I would just end with a few of the things that I've learnt going through the process of government digital transformation so far. So I guess the first is that transformation is hard, and sometimes you have to start again. And by that I mean that actually we have put a lot of effort sometimes into, I guess, what we might call brownfield sites. So we've really engaged with legacy. We've tried to move an organisational structure and a service delivery forward to a new space, what we might call fixing rusty trains. At least that's what my old boss used to call it. But I think what I've realised is that sometimes you have to build shiny new ones, because actually the drag and overhead of trying to change something that's broken is so much bigger than starting again and slowly transitioning service delivery and sunsetting an old system. So some of the stuff that we've started to talk about now is actually, why don't we look at how we do licensing in government, come up with the right way to do licensing, and slowly transition all of the different licensing delivery things into that new thing. I'm not saying that we cracked it, but I think my realization is that sometimes it is better to start again. So one of the reasons it's so hard in government is that there are a lot of really inefficient processes done really efficiently. So part of my job with Pay is to go to lots of operational delivery organisations who are delivering public services, and you have really diligent civil servants who are in there and they have to stamp 500 envelopes a day. And if they don't stamp 500 envelopes, you know, they're going to be punished, or their pay is going to be docked, or their, you know, awful things will happen to them. And in order to deliver that kind of the service, we have adopted the methodologies that were traditionally associated with machine production lines. We've taken a Henry Ford process and said, you know what, here's the service delivery, let's chop it up into all these atomized parts, and you can open the envelopes, and you can stamp the form, and you can type the form into the system. And what that means is, within the confines of the process that we have, we do it as efficiently as you possibly can do. You know, anyone that thinks that civil servants aren't hardworking, go and spend a day in an operational delivery context, because you will see the targets culture, everything that you think of as being part of the private sector mentality is there. But the corollary of that is that because everyone is so focused on their little bit, there's no one that's looking at the whole end-to-end journey. So I've been in research visits where I've said, oh, what happens next? And I get a nervous laugh, because they don't actually know what happens to the form when it goes to the next team, because they're just focused on the bit that they have to do. And what that means is that actually, you know, I guess another part of it is that I don't think that transformation, it's very easy to do transformation to people. You know, people have to be engaged in some kind of capacity in the transformation journey. And actually, if all you're focused on is this tiny atomized part of what you're doing, it's very difficult to see the bigger picture of why we want to make change. And I think what we're realizing more and more is that actually, I'm just about to start a new project actually, which is moving, so payments will continue in my absence, but to look at how we support teams that don't have the resources to have their own digital team, but do have offline services that they want to move online. Can we provide them with guidance and tooling that make that easy? And what we see in some of the departments that we're working with is where they have what might be called sort of a really, you know, we often talk about the frozen middle, you know, the middle layer of people who get in the way of everything. But conversely, there's often a kind of activator middle, where you've got your hardworking service delivery staff, you know, assessors or people who are caseworking, and then you've got your sort of senior management layer who are, you know, interested in sort of making themselves look good and talk to the right people. And then sometimes you have this middle management layer who are really scared and don't want to do anything, but sometimes you have these people who actually, they're the only ones who are close enough to delivery but far enough away to still have that overarching view and to be the instigators of change. And those are the people that we're really looking for when we try and find these new partnerships, and we want to encourage some partners to invest in. So I guess another learning for me is that user-centered design isn't just for end users. So you've probably thought a lot about this. I know that I've done my homework on the Computer Weekly article looking at the Windows estate and moving that onto common platforming. We're big on slogans, and one of the things we talked about is that civil servants are users too. You know, for a long time we talked about delivering better and end user services. And once, after Francis Maude had left his role as Minister of the Cabinet Office, he was asked, oh, is there anything you do differently? And he said, I would have spent more time fixing civil service IT before we did anything else. Because he saw that it was a way to get buy-in, he saw it was a way to increase efficiency, get people to just do more stuff. And so much of what we do now actually at GDS is about this, because yes, the payments bit that I showed you is about providing a really nice payment experience for end users, but where the savings come is making sure that we're administering payments as efficiently as possible. So that's all interfaces that are used by civil servants or finance teams and other people. And I think sometimes it's easy in a business context when you're under the cosh to be always thinking about your sort of sales targets and your end users, and forget that sometimes a lever that you can pull is really focusing on your own users. I guess this is a favourite one for me, and what I mean when I say agile is a philosophy and not a dogma is that too often I have been in meetings where people spend time arguing about whether they ran the right ceremony, or did we structure our user story in the right way, or were there enough points on this estimation or not. And what that does is totally miss the point of why we do things in an agile way, which is to say that it's not about some perfect structure, it's about what I call, I guess, a philosophy, which is, for me, summarised in, let's break things down into small parts, do a little bit, learn from it, and then do the next bit. So we're de-risking delivery, and we're making sure that we're always building the right thing. And I think that sometimes, maybe it's about my character, because I am, by inclination, perhaps not the most organised of people. Sometimes people come and visit our teams and they ask questions like, oh, are you doing Scrum Ban? Or, you know, where is your wall and how many points have you delivered this week? And I say, oh, I don't know. Because actually, we're not running ourselves in that way, but we are running ourselves in the way that tries to take the underlying themes of Agile delivery. And if you go and look at the Agile Manifesto, that's really all you need to really think about why we're doing things the way we do them. Telling a good story is essential. Now, if I give you one reading tip for a book that you can go away and read, it's nothing to do with GDS. It's a book called *Sapiens* by Rory. It's on all the bestseller lists, and some of you have probably read it. But basically what he talks about is mankind's capacity for myth-making and narrative building. And actually, if you look at a lot of the work that GDS has done, it's all about telling a good story. So like I said, right now we're 800 people. For a long time we were like 300 people against, or with an organisation of 450,000. So the reason that we had, I guess, an exponential impact was not because we were just really good at doing our jobs. It was because we were really good at talking about the things that we were doing. So one of my former bosses, Russell Davis, used to say, don't tell me how complicated it is, tell me how simple it's going to be. And that's what we try to do at GDS. So you might have seen, you know, we have a lot of big slogan-y posters with, like, you know, not many words on them and lots of colour. These are some of my favourites. But what these do is they allow people who, you know, maybe aren't in a well-supported environment to stick these up on the wall and say, you know what, I know I'm doing the right thing because, you know, here's a massive poster that says I am. And, you know, when I've had the privilege of going to help the United States Digital Service get set up, which is set up broadly on our model, and, you know, talking to someone who was from local government actually in the States, and she was kind of in, I don't know, some back of beyond state government, and she said, you don't understand, when I read the GDS blog and I put up my posters, I felt I was like, you know, I could put on my armour and go and face the, you know, the crazies that she was dealing with. And whenever I do anything after I work at GDS, I'm always going to be thinking about the story I'm telling and how I'm carrying people along on a journey. Because in the end, once you've got people's emotional buy-in, you're kind of half the way there. So, you know, we talk about showing the thing, we talk about user research as a team sport, we talk about the strategy being delivery, we talk about the unit of delivery being the team. And a lot of the talking that we do is on our blog. And what I want to really make clear is I'm not saying that telling a good story is about oversimplification, coming up with a slogan, making it all sound easy. Because actually, if you go back to the GDS blog, it's quite honest and open about how things are hard and how we made mistakes and what didn't work. And I think there's a degree there of authenticity that helps people see that actually we're not a cult that's telling them how to do stuff. We're just there to try and help them. And the last one, I guess, is the most important to me. If any of you are sitting up here close, you can see that the only sticker on my laptop, because I've just got a new one, says done is better than perfect. So you can probably guess which side of this divide I sit on. But what I've realised is that this purism, pragmatism kind of dichotomy is actually the kind of essential creative tension in an organisation, GDS, that helps us to do good work. If we were all pragmatists, we would have compromised ages ago. We would never have delivered the user-centred design services that we wanted. If we were all purists, we'd never have done anything, because we would have sat in a room and constantly critiqued ourselves into oblivion. But every day I get frustrated because I have to deal with this kind of conflict. You know, I have to have conversations with people to say, no, we're going to do this, and I know it's not the perfect thing that you want to do, but we're going to do it anyway. But they hold me to account, because I am a product manager. I'm under the, I guess, the business cosh of, you know, am I going to deliver enough on borders? Am I going to deliver savings? And they're not. My job is to shield them from that cosh so that they can tell me what the right thing is to do, and then I can make a compromise decision if I have to. And I think it's so easy if you fall on one of these divides, you know, to think that this is a disaster. But more and more I come back to every day just thinking that this is the only thing that keeps us honest and the only thing that makes sure that we deliver good stuff. So, I'm done. The last thing I thought it might be nice to leave you with is other people talking about GDS. So you've heard what I think. This is not intended to be a recruitment drive, but I hope that you'll see that I'm not the only one that's really passionate about the work that we do.
Everyone comes to GDS to try and make a difference because they know it's a place that is transforming government.
We're recognised around the world as an organisation that is doing important work, that is doing groundbreaking work to make things easier and clearer for users. Whether those users are citizens of the UK or whether those users are civil servants, it all depends on what project we're working on at any given time.
You can make such a big difference and touch so many people's lives, and I think that's what makes me get out of the bed every morning.
When I go home and talk about my job, I can actually point at a thing and say, well, that service that we used yesterday or last week, in some small way what I'm doing helps make that more of an efficient process, which therefore makes it a better service.
People are working incredibly hard to try and do good things for the country as a whole, and it is actually fun as well. It's the environment is somewhere where you actually look forward to going, which is amazing for a job.
I love the culture so much, and I love the people that come to work here. Everybody wants to make things better. Everybody's committed and everybody is super smart.
Here, they're always willing to train you. They're always willing to sort of educate you on certain stuff that you might not know. And I've only been here a few months, and already I've learned so much about how other things work. It's nice when everyone's just so friendly.
It's an organisation where there's lots of learning and development opportunities, a lot of career opportunities. It's also an organisation that really values the individual and trusts people to do their job effectively.
I love working at GDS. I didn't think I'd ever love working for a certain place as much as I do, and I think it's because we get to do a lot of different things, and we genuinely have the power to affect people's lives.
Our targets are how many more people can we please, and how much money can we save taxpayers, and what other kinds of good things can we do to help people. So yeah, definitely proud to be working for the government.
So it is a recruitment video, but I'm not showing it to you to be a recruitment video. I meant to cut that bit off at the end. That's it. Thank you very much. So you've probably got other things to go and be doing, but if you do want to ask questions now, I can stay, and if other people have to go, I can also answer any others.
Any questions?
Yeah?
Hi, I'm Tamsin, I'm one of the accounting managers. I have some questions around, you mentioned design principles, sorry, I'm writing notes. Principles and service standards.
Yeah.
Do these run top to bottom through GDS?
What do you mean by that?
So are they principles and standards that you adhere to as from each team to each team that works with GDS?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the design principles definitely overlay everything that we do, and the digital service standard is applied to every digital service that the government provides. So, like I said, if it's over 100,000 transactions, then it's centrally reviewed, but actually every department has to take their own services through that assessment process, even if it's less. What I should say is that every team at GDS also is free to develop its own team charter, anything else that they feel is important, but they can't contravene the overarching design principles, which kind of inform what we do.
How did the design principles get involved? Who was involved in that?
Now that is a good question that I don't know the exact answer to. I mean, so they were. Oh yeah.
That's a separate
yeah.
thing that I'll talk about later. But when they were created, maybe it was by a collection of people. But how do you evolve them, and how do you make sure that they're still relevant?
So one of the things that actually, if you take a look at if you have just Google the GDS design principles, they'll come up. What we did was we tried to choose principles that were, they were more generic than specific, so that they weren't going to date. Saying that we always want to focus on user needs, like hopefully no one's ever going to disagree with that one. But what we do is actually change the sort of longer articulation of what they mean. So, for example, if you look at the do less principle, in the guidance around it, we now talk about the idea of being a platform organisation and trying to do those things, which I think in our kind of the way that we thought about it originally, we hadn't conceived of that principle as particularly relating to that kind of business, but we've, I guess, re-articulated it in a way that keeps it current. So that's I guess what we're trying to do. We also had, for example, that first one, build for user needs. We used to have an asterisk that said not government needs. But actually what we realised is that that was being misinterpreted, because what we weren't saying is don't listen to civil servants as users, because they are. We were saying, don't be driven by some kind of bureaucratic response to a problem that isn't based on user needs. But we got rid of that because actually we found that it was basically distracting people from the overarching message that we wanted to send. Any other questions? Yeah.
What's your vision for your website? I'm just thinking about as a user of your services, like Lisa, for example. Would you want in the future maybe have a mobile app where users can go in and then the government agency can preempt user activity, so reminders around tax returns and all those sorts of things? Is that sort of the vision or the end of life?
Yeah. So there's always, I guess, there are both practical and ideological sort of minefields that we have to traverse. So one of the things that I talked about is that siloing. That means that actually our tech estate is quite siloed. So some of the stuff that we want to do around joined up service delivery is hard technically. There are also concerns around Big Brother and not we have to find a balance between providing services in a really convenient way and not looking like we're the all-seeing eye. I think that what I didn't talk about so much today, but one of the things that we are building at the moment at GDS is what we would call a canonical data infrastructure. So registers, so canonical lists of stuff that everyone in government uses. Until very recently, there are about 9 different lists in government of countries in the world, and they didn't all have the same number of countries on them. So now we have one list of countries in the world. It's owned by the Foreign Office. There's a registrar who owns that data, and anyone that wants to use a list of countries can call on the register. So we're doing that for publicly available knowledge, like the number of countries in the world, but also thinking about how we take that kind of canonical approach to personal data interchange. And what we don't believe in is data sharing particularly, so mass, taking lists of people and putting them somewhere else. And we don't particularly even, we're not super keen on wholesale data access, so saying, okay, well, you can access this person's whole record. What we're really interested in is very, very specific querying. So to say, for example, if you're applying for a blue badge, so a parking permit for disabled people, for the DVLA for a local council who is managing that application process to be able to query the DVLA database and just say, is Rory eligible for a blue badge? And the answer is yes, no. They don't need to know what my disability is, they don't need to know anything else that's already held somewhere else, but they do need to know the answer to the eligibility question. And I think that's where, as we start to have the common components and the registers, and this kind of these layers of infrastructure that we're building on, we start to be able to do things like, set up a business in one service flow. Because actually, we can populate the register at company's house that does businesses. We can, if you like, send you off to open your business bank account using Verify, because you can prove you are who you say you are online, and you can open a bank account without having to go in and show your passport. And so that's very much the vision. When I talk about ministers saying that they want to transform the relationship between the citizen and state, I guess that's what they really mean, is that we want to get to a position where you don't have to understand how to navigate government. You just need to know what you need to get done, and we'll help you get it done. Anyone else? Yeah.
So in terms of kind of the services, the common services, like Verify, like Pay, etc., how are you identifying kind of what next is?
So what we sort of at the beginning of the program for Government's Platform, we basically got all of the departments together and ran a series of workshops where we basically asked them, what's the most painful thing for you? And then we did a prioritisation exercise, and we looked at what people wanted, and we started there. We've also run a big piece of research which we called the Government as a Platform Discovery Project, which was basically taking a sample of the forms that still exist on GovUK, so that's all the offline services, and essentially cold calling hundreds of services to talk to them about what their challenges were, what they were struggling with. And actually, it's a little bit what you allude to, so the project I'm going to be working on came from that. So we did this analysis and we looked at, okay, well, 60% of services send some kind of notification, 30% of services take payments, so we're dealing with those already. But what 80% of services do is take information from citizens and do something with it. And at the moment, if you're a team that doesn't have digital expertise, it's very difficult for you to work out how to do that other than on a paper form that someone prints out and sends to you. So the project that I'm going to be working on is we're only at alpha, so we're not committed to saying that we definitely are going to solve that problem. What we're doing is we've done a discovery, so we've, I guess, sized the problem space and think like, this is a really tough, thorny area that we shouldn't be asking each department to work out for themselves. And now we're going into alpha, so we're starting to, in a sense, test out different potential solutions to those problems, which might be something around, centralized guidance. It might be some kind of centralized tooling. And then if it looks like from our kind of research that it's a goer, we'll move into beta and go with it like that. So I guess we're always trying to find out from our users, in this case the departments, what are the things that are really painful for them, and then trying to tackle those problems once. Yes?
How far away is online voting?
So that's really a policy question rather than a technology question. In the time that I have worked at GDS, I haven't come across a great degree of ministerial interest in driving towards online voting. That doesn't mean that it's not there, it just means that I haven't interacted with it. And it's not something that we're predominantly focused on. I guess we're mostly focused on service delivery.
You have interest from non-digital part of government about your approach to this, regarding outsourcing and that sort of thing, working together, building common services that make us digital, but the way of working to join up.
Yeah, I mean, there have been various initiatives in government about this kind of, I guess, common delivery of problems. Things like the mutualisation of some of the finance functions and HR provision. I can't really speak to that with any great degree of specialism to say whether or not they've been successful.
Are they talking to GDS about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to do, I think the most interesting crossover from the sort of digital to the non-digital is really is in the policy space, and trying to involve the principles of user-centered design in the policy design, which may not be digital delivery. So if you look at, particularly in the justice system, I know they're doing really great stuff. If you look at the Ministry of Justice digital blog, where they're seconding, service designers, product managers, user researchers into very traditional policy teams who don't have any exposure to, digital approaches, to just start to ask the right questions. Because if you think about it, user-centered design, it's not rocket science. It's about going and asking people, to understand the lived reality of the people that you're providing services to, and making sure that you're designing services that meet those needs. And I think we're less involved in some of the other, like, I guess the common delivery of some of the underlying business process stuff, like finance or whatever, but we are really engaged on the policy design side. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a delight. And if you do have other questions, I'll stick around afterwards to answer them.
That was great. I think some of the parallels to us, because we kind of started a lot of our digital stuff in our online department, which is where the ITV hub lives, customer-facing, user-facing. But the point you made about making sure the internal systems that we were using were as good as that, and now this modernisation program we're running now is mostly about the internal systems. And everyone's so used to great-looking SaaS tools, they're not going to accept a terrible kind of HTML1 style web interface. Yeah. They expect it to be kind of like nicely responsive. They expect to use it on their phone. So we've taken all that learning from that area, and we've introduced product teams, we've introduced like agile development across the entire organisation now. So you've got a slightly larger kind of population to deal with. We've got about 4,000 employees across the entire company, and government's probably got slightly more than that. But, no.
But I think actually it's a place that we'd love to learn from you, because like I said, in that sense that I guess we've come from some of the common approaches from the user-centered side, and you've probably done some of the more back office stuff that we're only now starting to get to. So I think you promised that you'd come back and talk to us. So
yeah, I think that's
the deal.
A typical tech talk. So
yeah.
I think the other thing you mentioned about kind of Conway's law, where because you've got these silos and the teams organised around that, and you're basically talking about the reverse Conway manoeuvre. And if Rob Taylor was here, he'd love to hear me say that. It's basically when pushes back up the other way, and you say, hang on, there needs to be a horizontal strike. We need to break down the silos. And I really hope that some of the approaches we use around agile delivery, trying a small kind of MVP, doing an experiment, getting data and then iterating, I wonder if that's going to go high up into the policy area, where they say, hang on, we've got an idea, rather than just like blasting out a new law, why can't we try all this in a small thing, get some data and actually see? So I wonder if it will eventually go all the way up.
Yeah, I cut out one video that I would encourage you to go and see if you do want to sort of try and convince any of your senior managers about agile. There's a guy who has the best title in the public sector. He's called Alan Eccles, and he is the Public Guardian, and he runs the Office of the Public Guardian, and that's the service that I talked about earlier. But there's a video on our YouTube channel of him talking about he is totally not a digital person by background, and he explains what it was like to work in a digital context to build that service. And he says explicitly that he never felt like he had more control over a project than when he worked in an agile way, because he felt that the regular check-ins, the constant seeing and sense checking, was a way that he could feel involved in the project in a way that senior managers just so often don't.
Great, thank you very much.
Cool.
Good. So Rory will be kind of sticking around a little bit just after here if you can. Then I think we're heading up to the 7th floor cafe if you want to kind of bother him and kind of ask him different questions about online voting again as well. So thanks all for coming. Obviously this is the tech forum. If you're interested in speaking, or if you know someone from outside as well who you think would be kind of a good fit for the tech forum, please let me know. Next month we've got a team from Amazon kind of coming in who are kind of having a look at the back to kind of see what the experience is like. And they'll be kind of talking about kind of machine learning and AI, so that's going to be on November the 24th. And then later on this evening at Eastern, where obviously we've got the Tech Social from about 6 o'clock onwards, so you're all welcome to kind of come along and have a drink and put a face to that 4x4. So thank you all for coming and see you next month. Cheers.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Good stuff.
I'm fascinated by how your colleagues managed to keep hold of that donut for the entire thing. I would have eaten it within seconds.